All right, in this video, what we are being asked to do is find the domain of these functions. I got two functions here and here for you. I'm gonna go through each one. I gave you some notes off to the side. We'll talk about what that means. So problem A, we've got to figure out our domain, possible x values that would work here. We need to exclude x values that make the denominator, the bottom part of this fraction, a zero. So we know we can't divide by zero, so what values could x be that would create a zero down here at the bottom? Those need to be excluded from our domain. On this second problem over here, if you look at example B, we need to exclude the x values that are going to give us a negative value inside the square root symbol. So what values would give us a negative number inside? Can't take the square root of a negative value, so those numbers would need to be excluded as well from our domain. All right, let's start with problem A, break this down. Exclude all x values that make this denominator zero, will not work. So what we would have to do here is rewrite the bottom, the numerator, x squared, or excuse me, the denominator, x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. We need to figure out what values x could be to make a 0. In order to do that, we're going to need to factor this quadratic. That would give us x, we're going to say minus 3 minus 1 would be the quadratic factored out, telling us that x cannot be a 3 or a 1. So 3 and 1 are not allowed to be used here. If you put a 3 or a 1 in, you're going to get a 0 down here at the bottom of the fraction, and we can't divide by 0. So when we go to graph this, the only numbers we can't include are 1 and 3. You're going to put an open circle there to indicate that we're not including those values. But other than that, every value for x makes sense. It will give us an output. We can input the value and out comes an output. The only two that won't work are 1 and 3. So you're going to need to fill in everything to the left, everything to the right, but we are excluding 1 and 3. Those are the two values for x that would not be a part of this function's domain. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now we go over to this problem here where we're taking the square root of 3 minus 2x. Remember, we cannot take the square root of a negative value. That's impossible to do. So in order for us to figure this one out, we got to go back to inequalities. All we need to know is that 3 minus 2x has to be greater than 0. All right, greater than 0. So numbers that are greater than 0 are positive values. Nice. So, or equal to, because we could also get a 0. Now, all I got to do here is solve the inequality. I like to tell my students to draw a line down the middle of the equality sign, start inverse operating. Don't forget, when we divide by a negative, we need to flip that sign. So now you got x is less than or equal to negative 3 over negative 2, which would come out to 3 over 2, also known as 1.5. So now all we need to do for this problem is draw a number line, mark where 0 is. I always expect my students to give me 0 on the number line. 1.5 would be just to the right of that, 1.5. I'm going to do a closed circle because x can be less than or equal to, so we're going to include that value of 1.5. And because it's x is less than or equal to 1.5, we're going to go to the left, indicating all values smaller or less than 1.5. So our domain here would be 1.5 or less. Our domain over here with this problem is any number in the world, all real numbers, except for 1 and 3. The reason 1 and 3 don't work is because they gave us a 0 down at the bottom of this fraction. Can't be done. The reason anything bigger than 1.5 won't work is because that would give us a negative value in our square root symbol, which would not make sense. You can't take the square root of a negative value. So here's your two domains. Hopefully this makes sense. Study hard and good luck on your upcoming test.